Aim in any shooter game is naturally important, but when you jump into the realms of Battle Royale, where survival is that main goal, you obviously want to make sure that your aim is as precise as possible. You don't want to be sent to the gulag in Warzone or be that player asking your squad for a buyback over and over and over again. So how do you make sure that happens, that you avoid all of that? Today, I want to discuss with you a few ways to improve your aim, thus allowing you to win more gunfights and engagements, and hopefully help you stay alive until the very end, becoming the last player or squad standing and get you more wins in Warzone as well. As we go along, let me know down below if you have any tips that you swear by and would recommend that perhaps we didn't touch on in this video. And as well, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone and Modern Warfare, including tips like these on a daily basis. But anyways, let's get into it. First things first, we got to talk about a few prefacing notes, some things that need to be established before we jump into this. The first thing I want to mention is that we're going to be talking a lot about console tips for a lot of this video. From at least the vocal majority who I've seen comment over the past couple of years, PlayStation 4 and Xbox are the main platforms that out of the audience that we've accumulated, it seems to be the main locations of play. We can touch briefly on PC later in the video, but a fair warning, PC hasn't been a main platform of mine for many years now, and I won't claim to be any expert in that field. Also, a ton of the discussion here that we'll talk about is subjective and thus will vary in outcome depending on the player. You watching this may have different outcomes, quicker or slower in adjusting times than that of the next person. Also, the biggest thing is that it's gonna take practice. You're not gonna pick up a controller for the very first time. You're not gonna get on mouse and keyboard for the very first time and just absolutely snap to every single enemy, getting every single kill, winning every single gunfight. That stuff takes practice. I still think that I have plenty of room to improve in my day-to-day gameplay, and I've been playing Call of Duty, among other games, for what I'd consider far more than the average player for the last 12 to 13 years. But anyways, let's talk about some of these tips here. Firstly, let's start out with, before you even get into the game, some things you should consider. There's a couple of settings you want to play around with and get just right for your own, again, personal subjective gameplay feel. Those things dealing with your sensitivity settings, your aim assist type setting, and your response curve type. For sensitivity, this really comes down to striking a balance of what you feel is effective but not too slow or not too fast. A general understanding for sensitivity, lower is easier to control, but you also naturally sacrifice that reactivity that you have with a higher sensitivity. If you play on a lower sensitivity and you get shot in the back, you're not going to immediately 180 and be able to snap to see where that enemy may be. But if you play on a higher sensitivity, you can turn on a dime, but staying pinpoint precise over that gunfight may be a little tougher than that if you play on a lower sensitivity. Personally, I play on a 9.9 sensitivity. I've heard that's high, I've heard that's low. It again just depends on the player, but it feels right to me. So I'd advise playing around with some of these and definitely finding what works best for you. Aim assist type is something that is new with Modern Warfare. You have the ability to toggle between standard, precision, or focus settings. Standard offers a bubble effect for aim assist. This is how it's always been in Call of Duty, where you'll get close to an enemy and it will slow down your aim to pull to that player for a little bit more precise accuracy. This can be activated when aiming down sight, or if you're strafing back and forth, you might notice it at a hip fire pull as well. But things like your precision and focus both have some serious reductions on that, almost as if the regular aim assist would be kind of too annoying to some players. So they toned it down and they made that bubble a lot smaller and more focused onto the player model. Now, if you're talking about what's best here for this, I would definitely say standard for the majority of engagements, but if you are somebody that predominantly uses a sniper, precision might not be a bad option as well, because it slows down the hardest once you actually hit the body. Now, finally, the last setting we'll talk about is that of response curve, which is in relation to how your aiming stick handles the input to the aim rate. Standard is what you'd be used to if you've played any Call of Duty in the past. It's progressive, it allows for quick, minuscule adjustments, but requires a full push to accelerate into a faster side-to-side swap. But with the introduction of linear and dynamic, it offers a little bit more customization to this. Linear has a direct correlation to the amount of pressure that you put on your stick, so if you end up putting a lot of pressure on, you'll quickly snap over, or if you end up putting a little bit, it won't respond as much. Dynamic is a little bit snappier. It's mentioned as being a reverse S-curve mapping type, so you can consider all those, but again, as with the other settings, they're subjective and may take a little bit of practice to get pinpointed down to. But outside of settings, actually getting into some gameplay, I would definitely recommend having some training exercises that you can take these tips into and then practice. We said that practice is very key. You're not going to get this stuff overnight and become the next Shroud or somebody like that, but training exercises, personally, I warm up with a handful of different ones. If you own the full game of Modern Warfare, if you're not on the free-to-play build of Warzone with Battle Royale and Plunder, you of course have access to all of Modern Warfare's MP. You have access to custom games, and that's where I play around with a lot. I'll play a game with bots as a warm-up match where for about 5 to 10 minutes, I'll practice snapping to precise locations by using only a 50 GS or Desert Eagle and trying to get a 30 kill streak, a nuke against bots, only using headshots. Now, yes, I can use a weapon like an MP5 or an M4 to warm up and simulate something that would actually be player-to-player combat that I'd actually be using, but with the 50 GS, it's a guaranteed one shot to the head from close to mid-range, so when I want to aim high to inflict as much damage possible, that's where I want to be. So I'll use that and warm up, and I'll play around with that for a little bit. Again, about 5 to 10 minutes. But if you're on the free-to-play version and you don't want to swap over to just MP for that, you also do have the practice modes in Battle Royale. Battle Royale will see you drop into Karst River Quarry in a much smaller scale variation of Battle Royale, where you of course have one life, but you're playing up against a couple of bots. You can still utilize the buy functions, you can still utilize the armor functions, you can still drop in all that kind of stuff, but you can try and snap to different enemies and just warm up your aim before jumping into the real thing. Also, fun fact, if you haven't completed this before, you'll also get a weapon skin for completing it for the very first time. Another tip that I also recommend as a sort of warm-up is Plunder. I know that you guys may not feel the exact same as me, but Plunder to me is kind of just an extra mode. I care much more about Battle Royale, and so therefore, I don't really care what happens in Plunder. I'll go in, I'll go hot, I'll try and just wipe squads solos, and I don't really care if I get decimated by this by taking on too many players, because at the end of that life, I can just respawn and do it all over again. So doing any number of those things will help warm up your aim, I think, and it will help you be able to snap to more precise locations when you consider all this kind of stuff. As for some general tips, though, when you actually get into the game of Battle Royale, a couple of things I'd recommend is firstly, burst or tap fire at a distance. Close quarters, by all means, hold down that trigger, but if you're going to be playing at a distance and you're not using, say, a sniper rifle, you're not going to be able to control that recoil and thus your aim as much at range if you hold down that trigger. Tapping will, of course, alert the player that you're shooting at them, but they still haven't tracked you more than likely at that point, and so you can still get off 5, 6, 7, 8 shots, which a lot of the times, if you are precise, you can end up getting the kill for that. Allowing your weapon to recenter allows you to be as precise as possible. Another tip that I'd recommend mostly comes down to being applicable with sniper rifles, but leading your shots into with a sniper, it's very easy that you can see that tracking a player, trying to match their movement speed before then compensating for that distance between and that travel time, that's where you'll have the most success. If you can take a couple of seconds to try and match that speed and then move just a slight tad bit ahead, you'll then have a better understanding of where you have to lead your shots and thus improving that aim of being able to hit them at a distance. While it is most notably seen with sniper rifles because you're mostly tracking at a distance with a sniper scope, the same can be applied though to regular weaponry. Another key piece of improving your aim comes down to simply the loadouts and attachments you have on offer and what you end up using in game. With Warzone, it's no secret that loadout drops are probably the most valuable thing in game. So if you're not going for those, you're already cutting yourself down at the knees. But assuming that you end up going here and utilizing the loadout drops, if you're looking for the most accurate of builds, you want to have your loadouts built out for recoil control and precision. Now, talking about precision a little bit, we can talk, well, reticles. That's the most precise you can make this weapon outside of just simply controlling it yourself. To me, the most easy to use, the most unobstructive to your view is just a simple red dot sight, something like a GI mini reflex, a solo zero optic mini reflex, or even things like your Cronin LP945 mini reflex and the Viper reflex sights. Something that just has a precise dot. I don't go too far in depth to the customization of them where you can put designs in that, because to me, I think that's a little more obstructive to the view. And of course, it allows you to just see exactly where your shot is going to be placed. To me, I think there are weapons that you don't need an optic, but it could be advantageous. Others, I would definitely recommend running some on, just because iron sights might not be too favorable. Now, as for recoil control, it's one thing to have the initial aim to snap to an enemy, to find them, to target them and get on point, but another to stay on that aim within a gunfight. Things you want to utilize are under barrel grips like the Commando or Ranger 4 grips, rear grips of the rubberized grip tape, muzzles like the muzzle brake and compensator, which are built for recoil control. Barrels that are built for longer range usually have increases to the damage range and bullet velocity, but they also often offer recoil control. Just given the natural weight of that barrel, it keeps it close to that center as opposed to a lighter barrel. As well, stocks are another option that you want to play around with. There are certain weapon-specific stocks that aid in aiming stability. You want to make sure that if you're going simply for aiming control, you want to have as many of those as possible. Naturally, you also want to be able to have a weapon that gets up in a relatively quick fashion as well, so you might have to mix and match with some things that optimize ADS time as opposed to just fully kitting out for recoil control and aiming stability. But again, that's one of those things that falls into the subjective category that you may find plays differently for you than somebody else. But overall, those are the things that I would definitely recommend to run in game, to warm up with before you jump into game, and some settings that I definitely think you should play around with it. Again, I can't give you a definitive answer of you need to use this setting, and this setting. Instead, it's just going to take a little bit of time for you to warm up and try each of those out to see what works best for you. Now, on the PC side, coming back to that, I don't really want to spend a whole ton of time on it because, again, I don't consider myself an expert in this field anymore. But most of the stuff that we could talk about anyways really is subjective, that I can only just mention, hey, try this out and try and find something that works for you, but try around and find a DPI, a mouse sensitivity that works well for you. It's gonna vary depending on how fast, how slow it feels to you. It's gonna vary depending on how much space you have to work with your range of motion of your arm when using your mouse. Adjust your FOV accordingly to allow you to see more or less of what you think is needed in that field of view so that you can spot an enemy and then snap to them. But all in all, that's my tips here for improving your aim, to getting better over time, to putting that to use in game, and hopefully winning more engagements and thus winning more games in Battle Royale in Warzone. So that's where we're gonna wrap it up. I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. Again, is there any tip that you swear by that maybe we forgot to put in this list that we just didn't include? Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts. But hopefully this can help you out in some way, shape, or form. And if it did, make sure you drop a like down below. If you are new to the channel as well, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare and Warzone. Updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. We got you covered here on the channel. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. I live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. But sending out of the way, thank you guys all so much for watching. Minus an espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.